So I've talked a lot about narcissists in my most recent videos. I did a video where I talked about the signs that you might be dating a narcissist. And then I did a follow-up video where I talked about how to get a narcissistic ex back if you were dumped or if you broke up. But that video begs the question, and really both of them do, is it a good idea to date someone who is a full-blown narcissist or who has strong narcissistic tendencies and traits? And that's what we're covering in today's video. Is that even a good idea if you become aware of it? Hi, I'm Jeff Campbell from DivorcedParentsClub.com, and I'm glad you're here with me. So before we dive into the meat of the video, I do want to make an important distinction because there is a huge difference between someone who has full-blown NPD and someone who just has narcissistic tendencies or traits. There's a big difference there. And if you want to dive into those differences a little more thoroughly, you should watch the first video that I just mentioned about the signs that you might be dating a narcissist, because I cover those things in detail in that video. I'll put a link to that down in the description below. But the first question that comes up is, what kind of person dates a narcissist? And I don't want you to beat yourself up too badly. If you've just found yourself in one relationship with someone who was a narcissist or had strong narcissistic tendencies, that's normal. Happens to virtually all of us. It doesn't really mean anything if it's only happened one time. However, if you repeatedly find yourself drawn to narcissists, that's a different story. That means there's something in you that is broken and that needs to be fixed and addressed so that you can move past this, because you are somehow attracting them and they are attractive to you. And you got to figure out what that is. I want to talk about a term that's used in the psychology world a lot called repetition compulsion. I've talked about that a lot in some of my other videos, so you may have heard me speak about that before. But essentially, we are drawn to familiar behavior patterns, often behavior patterns we saw as a young child. They became familiar to us, and there is comfort in that familiar, even if we know it's self-destructive. It's like the child of a smoker who died of lung cancer who becomes a smoker themselves. They know it's bad logically, but it's familiar to them, and there's comfort in that familiar. So if you frequently find yourself dating a narcissist over and over and over again, it's likely that someone in your childhood, if you're the guy, maybe it was your mom, or if you're a woman, maybe it was your dad, someone close to you was a narcissist. And even though you necessarily didn't like everything that they did, or maybe they were cruel and mean and treated you very poorly, but it's familiar to you. So guess what? You're drawn to that as an adult. So in order to work through that, you really need to get into therapy and figure out some of these childhood issues, talk about the root causes of it and recognize it. And then with your therapist, find a way to work through those things. So what are narcissists attracted to? And it's a common misconception that narcissists are attracted to weak people that they see as prey, that they think they can easily manipulate and take advantage of. That's a total misconception. That's not really how it works for the mind of a narcissist. They actually like to go for someone who is strong-willed, someone who is intelligent, someone with powerful traits. Think of it this way. The better you are, the stronger you are, the more successful you are. And if they're with you, the better it makes them look. So that's really what they're drawn to. Now, obviously, with someone with full-blown NPD, there is a strong manipulation tactic going on there. They will look to take advantage of you, even if it's not an overt thought in their mind. It may be more subconscious. They will look to take advantage of you, but they don't seek out weak-minded individuals that they can prey upon. It's not like that. Another big question people want to know is, will a relationship with a narcissist last? And the short answer is, to a large degree, it comes down to you and your tolerance of their behavior and whether or not they recognize their destructive patterns and seek out help for it. But as long as you are meeting their needs and giving them what they want, then they're going to stay with you for a very, very, very long time. You could marry them and stay married for years, and it really comes down to whether or not you get fed up enough to leave. Now, that doesn't mean that you can stay with them indefinitely and not have them do things that might violate your boundaries or violate the agreements that you've built your relationship upon. They might very well do that. And so then it comes down to whether or not you're willing to put up with that. And what some of those things are, some of those destructive behaviors that you might see in a long-term relationship, I'm going to cover a little bit later in the video. Real quick, if you like this video and you want to see more videos like it, hit that like button for me. It sends a great signal to YouTube. They show my videos to more people, helps me grow my channel, and it's it's a great way to say thank you to me for taking the time to make these videos. So another question that people have is, do narcissists get bored with their long-term partners? In other words, if they're in a relationship for a really long time, do they get bored with those people? And the short answer is yes. Narcissists always need that quick fix of attention and validation and drama and chaos. And a long-term relationship can get boring to them if it's stable and there's nothing really going on in it. It's routine. That's death to a narcissist. And that's why a lot of the time narcissists are drawn to the chase of getting someone, especially someone who is maybe a little resistant to being in a relationship with them. They love the thrill of the hunt. But once they get the person, and it's no longer as thrilling as it used to be, they do kind of tend to get bored. So if you are in a relationship with a narcissist and you want to prevent that from happening, you do need to look for ways to add excitement to the relationship that aren't destructive, obviously, and look for ways to spice things up, change things up a little bit. Don't get complacent, don't get routine. And a lot of us in long-term relationships do tend to do exactly that. And that can have a detrimental effect on any relationship, not just ones with a narcissist. Another question people have is, what makes a narcissist fall in love? And again, it's important to make a distinction here between someone with full-blown NPD and someone with narcissistic tendencies or traits, because there is a big difference there. Someone with full-blown NPD really isn't capable of falling in love in the same way that you and I think about falling in love. Narcissists crave attention and validation, and not necessarily just from you. They crave it from lots and lots and lots of sources. But they will seek out partners who can provide that adoration, essentially. They want someone who will listen to them without just trying to solve their problems, guys. You know what I'm talking about. But listen to them talk about their accomplishments and what they've done and how great they are without invalidating any of that. Someone who will shower them with compliments and praise and make sure that they always feel great about themselves, because ultimately they seek out that attention and validation because they lack that feeling inside. Deep down inside, they are very insecure. So they seek out that attention and validation through external sources to kind of fill that bucket. But it's kind of like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. It never actually gets filled up. So they can fall in love, at least people with narcissistic tendencies and traits, not so much full-blown NPD. They can fall in love, but to a degree, depending upon how strong those tendencies are, it's kind of like they're falling in love with what you can do for them, not so much falling in love with you. So if you're in a long-term relationship with a narcissist, what does that actually look like day to day? And unfortunately, I will say that most narcissists, and this would be people with strong narcissistic tendencies or full-blown NPD, they're going to become more controlling over time. And they're going to start to see you as their property, not as their equal. And really, they see you there to serve their needs. They don't see themselves as serving your needs. Now, that doesn't mean they don't ever do anything for you. They want to keep you if you're supplying what they need. So they are going to do enough to sort of keep you from leaving, but that's not the same thing exactly. But I've talked a lot about how narcissists need that attention and validation. And by nature, they are very, very flirty. They flirt with everyone. They don't necessarily flirt with the intention of doing anything inappropriate, but that doesn't mean they won't. And because they think they're better than everybody else and that the rules don't apply to them, cheating does tend to happen more with narcissists than it does with people who aren't narcissistic. So that could definitely happen in a long-term relationship, especially if things have gotten boring and complacent and there's no level of excitement, nothing different going on. Narcissists tend to be kind of cruel, and over time that will grow. And you may eventually find that they're nicer to everybody else than you. And that's just kind of how it is. And you have to be aware of that. It's okay to call them out on that, but I don't want you to ever try and engage in a full-blown argument with a narcissist. You're not going to win that argument, and it's just going to create unnecessary drama and chaos. It's okay to tell them when they've hurt your feelings. It's okay to set healthy boundaries and enforce those boundaries, but avoid engaging in a full-blown argument with a narcissist. I did recently do a video where I talked about the difference between setting and enforcing healthy boundaries and ultimatums. So if you're not sure how to do that or what the differences are, check out this video right up here. There's going to be a card for it that pops up in the corner where I walk you through that. You're also likely going to find that you're walking on eggshells more and more and more over the course of a long-term relationship with a narcissist. Their behavior can be wild and unpredictable. And oftentimes when we're in a relationship with a narcissist, our self-esteem suffers as a result of the relationship. And so you begin to be on pins and needles when you're around them because you're not sure how they're going to respond to things. And you're also on pins and needles when you're not around them, waiting to hear from them or wondering what they might be doing. It makes us more and more and more insecure unless we're aware of that and have systems in place to combat that. Over time, they also will begin to shift their responsibilities to you. Ultimately, they dream of a life of leisure where they're taken care of and they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, with whomever they want. And they want you to kind of take care of all the day in and day out stuff for them. So that could be chores, could be finances, could be whatever. But over time, they are going to pass more of that torch to you. Financial instability also goes hand in hand with a narcissist because they're so impulsive and they just want to do whatever they want, whenever they want. And so that means reckless spending a lot of the time. And again, if they're kind of putting their financial basket onto you to take care of, they're not really caring about how their spending might be derailing your household budget or anything like that. So do look for that and have systems in place to kind of quell that. Maybe you've got separate bank accounts if you're married. I don't think it's a good idea to have joint bank accounts if you're not married. But even if you are married, maybe it's a good idea to have separate bank accounts and you put a set amount of money in their bank account every month, basically as an allowance. And when that money is gone, that money is gone. And you've got a strong boundary around that. And then lastly, it's not uncommon, even in short-term relationships with a narcissist, but especially with long-term, it's not uncommon to see a lot of excess drama and chaos. And I know as a guy, a lot of the time I need a little bit of that. It creates that level of excitement, that sexual tension in a relationship. And I don't like to have a relationship where there's none of that because then it gets boring very quickly. There is the concept of too much of a good thing. And a lot of times with narcissists, there will be an unhealthy level of drama and chaos that permeates the relationship. And over time, that can grow. And that leads us to our next point. Is it better to break up with a narcissist than to try and stay with them and make it work? And I'm going to go back once again to this idea that there's a difference between someone with full-blown NPD and someone with narcissistic tendencies and traits. If they have full-blown NPD, it's going to be virtually impossible for you to have a healthy relationship with them over any length of time. It's just not likely going to happen. But if they have narcissistic tendencies or traits, even strong ones, you can definitely find ways to make it work, but it's going to take compromise from both of you. Let me explain that. So by nature, a narcissist is going to be kind of cruel, heavily critical. They see themselves as being better than you and that the rules don't apply to them. That's just kind of how their brain works. And as I've mentioned, that's deeply rooted in their own insecurities. But if they can become aware of those insecurities and aware of the root causes of their narcissistic tendencies and aware of how they show up in their interactions with you and with other people, that's huge. It's kind of like that moment of clarity when the alcoholic realizes that they're an alcoholic. They haven't stopped drinking yet, but they're well on their way to fixing their issue because they had that moment of clarity. So if your partner who has narcissistic tendencies or traits can have that same moment of clarity, that's a really good sign for you if you want to be in a long-term relationship with them. And then the next step is they have to actually get help for this. Some form of therapy. It could be traditional talk therapy. It could be something a little more off the beaten path, like Reiki work or DBT therapy, or even something called EMDR, which is basically utilizes strobe light kind of effects and rapid eye movements to kind of get to the root quickly of childhood trauma. And then it's also going to take compromise on your part. You have to recognize that this person has these tendencies and traits. And even though they've now recognized that they have these things and they may be seeking out help for it from some sort of therapy, they're not likely ever just going to check this off the list and be done with it. These things are always going to be part of who they are, but they don't have to derail your relationship and they don't have to destroy your relationship, but you have to accept the fact that this is part of who they are and they may never fully change. And you have to be okay with that. And you also have to have strong systems in place for you to deal with some of the issues that can come up. You can't let your self-esteem plummet. You've got to be able to set and enforce healthy boundaries. You've got to be able to communicate with them in a healthy way when they're doing things that trigger you or violate your boundaries. And it's probably a good idea for you to see a therapist also, and maybe for the two of you to go together, at least for a little bit of time until you can kind of get over some of the big hurdles that often derail relationships with someone with narcissistic traits. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'd done a couple of other videos about narcissism. And let's say that you're in the situation where you had dated someone and that you feel like they're the love of your life, but now you're broken up and you want to get them back despite them being a narcissist. If that's the case, the good news is you probably can do it, but there are some specific steps that you need to follow that are different than trying to get back with a regular ex, a quote unquote regular ex. So if that's the case, I want you to check out this video right up here where I walk you through that step by step. I show you everything you need to know to get back together again with your narcissistic ex. But for now, I'll see you in the next video.